whenever you talk about tap dancing, you said, who's the world's greatest dancer? We always say, Bill Robinson was the world's greatest tap dancer.
Boy, he got educated feet. Boy, I practice all the time. Here's one I sat up all night trying to do.
Well, Bill Robinson, he really had the tap thing going and he had the joy thing going. And so it was very pleasurable to watch him dance because he appeared to be having such a great time.
Honest to God, he was something else. He was the greatest, and doors have opened for us that would never have opened had he not been there.
Bill Bojangles Robinson was a legend among dancers and a hero to his public. With his ever-present smile and endless energy, he charmed his way into the hearts of millions. But few knew of the obstacles he had to overcome to get to the top, or the lives he touched along the way. The year was 1878. Rutherford B. Hayes was president. There were just 38 states in the Union, and men like Alexander Graham Bell and Thomas Edison were experimenting with new inventions to lead the world into a modern age. But America was also in the process of healing the wounds of a dark past. The Civil War had ended just 13 years earlier, and the country was desperately trying to rebuild itself. It was during this period of change and uncertainty that Bill Robinson was born, on May 25th in Richmond, Virginia. Richmond, the former capital of the Confederacy, was struggling to regain its status as a major center of commerce, and with slavery now abolished, many recently freed blacks were in a new fight to hold on to their rights as citizens.
The whole South after the Civil War was in complete, utter turmoil. Blacks almost had to begin to build their whole existence from scratch. The whole agrarian economy had broken down. You had many, many blacks coming into the city who were recently out of slavery looking for jobs. It was a very difficult time. The South was essentially still fighting the Civil War.
Little is known about Bill Robinson's parents, who died by the time he was 5 or 6 years old. Although he had a grandmother and a brother, the young orphan made the streets his home, like many other poor black children born in the shadow of slavery. Bill left school in the first grade and did not learn to read or write. Instead, he spent his days in the local marketplace working odd jobs like shelling peas, shining shoes, and dancing in the streets for pennies. In the evenings, Bill joined the crowd of children who gathered outside Richmond's elegant Ford Theater to dance for the wealthy patrons. Inside the whites-only theater, Richmond's upper crust enjoyed minstrel shows, a popular tradition left over from pre-war days, where white performers in blackface makeup imitated the songs and dances of plantation slaves.
In the minstrel shows, as opposed to giving blacks the opportunity to play those roles, the roles actually went to white people. What they did was to get this makeup and put it on white faces and hands to make the white entertainers appear as if they were blacks.
Every time a new minstrel show came into town, they used to announce it by parading down the main street of the town, which happened to have been Broad Street of Richmond, Virginia.
Bill learned to imitate the parading minstrel performers, and he gained a reputation on the streets as a skillful dancer. He also had a reputation for swiping food from the local merchants, which earned him the nickname Bojangles.
Bojangles was a Southern term for mischief maker, which was more than appropriate for Bo at that time.
Penniless and unable to read or write his own name, at the age of 12, Bill hopped a freight train to Washington, D.C. to seek his fortune. There, he found a job as a stable boy at Benning's racetrack and considered becoming a jockey, one of the few lucrative professions open to blacks. But he learned more about betting on the horses than about riding them. Having failed to launch a career at the racetrack, Bill returned to street dancing and soon landed his first paying job in show business, playing a pickaninny in a musical show called The South Before the War.
A pickaninny was a young black child who had to sing, dance, and look cute up on stage. A lot of people later on looked at this as a demeaning situation, but if it was the only way to get involved in show business and get an education, some people took the opportunity.
In those days, they had slavery scenes, and they had the little black kids sitting around with the bandanas on their heads, and they're doing the dance, they're doing the shuffle and the sand dance. They were all pickaninnies.
Bill traveled with the show for several years, but when he grew too old for the role of a pickaninny, he ended up back on the streets. The teenager lived from hand to mouth, dancing in beer halls and honky-tonks, any place that would have him. By the time he was 19, he was old enough to join the Spanish-American War as a drummer in a black regiment. After the war, the 22-year-old made his way to the bustling metropolis of New York City, which was growing busier and more exciting every day. Immigrants from all over the world poured into the urban Mecca in search of the American dream. It was the turn of the century, and New York was emerging as the center of the nation's arts, commerce, and entertainment. Bill was able to make a name for himself dancing in Manhattan's clubs, music halls, and small vaudeville theaters. He soon caught the attention of George W. Cooper, a successful black comedian who invited Bojangles to go on the road with him as his new partner.
George Cooper was phenomenal for Bo at that point. Cooper was an incredibly talented straight man, and he taught Bo comedy, and that was an important part of Bo's future. And he taught him professionalism.
Working with Cooper meant a steady paycheck for Bill and a chance to play the most prestigious theaters in vaudeville, traveling with their song and dance act 52 weeks a year.
Vaudeville was a very interesting type of entertainment. They didn't have the big bands or the chorus lines. They just had acts, very good acts.
The most famous theaters in vaudeville were on the Keith and Orpheum circuits. However, these circuits were also predominantly white. Only a handful of black performers like Williams and Walker and Cooper and Robinson found success there. Treated as second-class citizens, they were placed under a number of restrictions, including the two-colored rule.
The two-colored rule meant that you could not perform alone on stage as a black performer. The white theater owners would say that it took two black heads in order to have enough sense to entertain a white audience, which is, of course, ridiculous to say, but those were the rules that he was working under.
Robinson started out playing the clown to Cooper's straight man, but by the time Bill was 30, the act had evolved to highlight his dancing, which by now was the most popular part of their act. While Bill was a consummate professional on stage, his off-stage behavior was another story. Never a smoker or a drinker, Bill had only one weakness: gambling. His obsession was so great that he would sometimes gamble away the weekly paycheck before Cooper ever saw it.
Oh, he was a gambler. Bill bet on the racetracks, bet on the horses, but his big thing was pool. He would go to any town and look up the best pool player. He got beat a lot.
In 1914, after 12 successful years, Cooper and Robinson ended their partnership, and for the first time since 1902, Bill was on his own. Finding another partner would be difficult, and the 36-year-old dancer longed to have his own solo act. He set his sights on breaking the two-colored rule and approached a successful agent named Marty Fawkins for help. Fawkins admired his bold ambition, and he devised a plan to make Bill the first solo black dancer in vaudeville.
Marty Fawkins was very aggressive in trying to make things happen for him, and I don't think there were a lot of people who had managers who believed in them so much.
In 1916, Bill made history by performing without a partner at Chicago's Marigold Gardens Theater. Through sheer determination and talent, Bill Robinson had broken down vaudeville's color barrier. But he could never have imagined the heights to which his fame would soon soar. The world was getting to know and love Bill Bojangles Robinson. His dancing was winning him a place among America's top vaudeville entertainers. But he still had many doors to open and many barriers to cross. The year was 1916. President Woodrow Wilson was struggling to keep the country out of war, and Americans were enjoying their last moments of peace. Theatergoers across the country welcomed the lighthearted comic style of Bill Robinson, who by now was being billed as the dark cloud of joy.
Bill Robinson would talk while he was dancing, and he would say, you know, I'm going to do a step for you now that I made up, you know, when I danced for the King of Sweden. And then he said, you know, watch out, here it comes, here it is. And it was like the height of entertainment.
Working the vaudeville circuit meant constant travel. Never having known the comforts of a real home, Bill loved life on the road. But for a black performer, traveling from town to town meant dealing with racism every day.
Even though he had reached such stature as a performer, Bo was never allowed to eat in most places and would have to find meals in kitchens, and could never stay at the hotels, even though he could very well afford to go to the top hotel of any city he was playing in.
Racism in America was escalating. D.W. Griffith glorified the Ku Klux Klan in his epic film, The Birth of a Nation. Lynchings in the South were on the rise. And with America now at war, black soldiers found they were treated better abroad than in their own country. By 1920, membership in the Ku Klux Klan soared to 4 million. Bill had learned long ago that segregation and racism were facts of life. However, he would not tolerate injustice. Whatever the cost, even if it meant a fight, Bill stood up for his rights.
He had an attitude, Bill had an attitude that he didn't want anybody to walk over him, and they didn't.
He was, more than anything else, someone who was willing to fight for self-respect and put his own neck on the line in order to do so, and he did so many times.
Bill was accustomed to taking care of himself. Although there were rumors of a failed marriage in his past, he was known for his fiercely independent spirit. But in 1921, at the age of 43, he surprised everyone by marrying an ambitious young drugstore clerk named Fanny Clay.
Fanny Clay was a remarkable young woman who was attending the Chicago School of Pharmacy. For a woman to go on for advanced education in those days was extremely rare. For a black woman to go on for advanced education was almost unheard of.
She loved that man more than she loved herself. Not only that, but she was his business manager and whatnot, so she saved his money. Sometimes she acted like she was his mother. She was so protective of him.
In the shadow of Manhattan's towering skyscrapers lies black, sprawling Harlem, greatest Negro metropolis in the world.
Bill and Fanny made their home in Harlem, the new center of America's black culture and the home of New York's most dazzling nightlife. It was the roaring 20s, a time of prosperity, extravagance, and hedonism, and all could be found in abundance in Harlem. White New Yorkers came in droves to Harlem's prohibition nightclubs to drink bootlegged whiskey and be entertained by exotic black musicians and chorus girls.
The Cotton Club was a first-class club. Had beautiful dancing girls, beautiful show girls, the best orchestras. Every celebrity you could think from Broadway and Hollywood, they were there. It was wonderful.
Everything was first rate. Everything was glamorous. Even the chorus girls were glamorous. When they left, they had minks on, they had mink stoles, they had foxes. The girls were sharp.
Even more exciting was a new artistic and intellectual movement known as the Harlem Renaissance.
It's a beginning of a period of the flowering of the arts, a rebirth of black talent, all in one place. You can imagine Harlem with Duke Ellington, Langston Hughes, Paul Robeson, all these people living in this place.
It was glamour. It was glamour, and it was fashion, and it was music and dance and poetry and art in all its form. It's like a Camelot in Harlem. Everything was just swinging, everything.
Bill and Fanny were part of a new black upper class that joined in the celebration of Harlem's golden age.
He loved Harlem. Harlem was a place where he could be who he wanted to be. It was a place where he felt at home, and people knew him, and people appreciated him. It was his town. He owned the place.
By the mid-1920s, the popularity of Harlem's all-black shows had spread downtown to Broadway. Stars like Eubie Blake, Ethel Waters, and Florence Mills were making a name for themselves on the legitimate stage. Bill Robinson made his Broadway debut in an extravagant all-black musical entitled Lou Leslie's Blackbirds of 1928.
Lou Leslie would always get the best talent for his shows. Naturally, Bill Robinson and L.A. Hall were the two great stars. And they had such great songs like I Can't Give You Anything But Love, Diggy Diggy Do, Doing the New Lowdown.
Blackbirds was a smash hit, and at the age of 50, Bill Bojangles Robinson had truly hit the big time. Recognized as one of Broadway and Vaudeville's top performers, Bill was now able to command as much as $3,000 a week, making him the highest paid black entertainer in the world. On October 29, 1929, the stock market crashed, and the roaring 20s came to an abrupt halt. Harlem was hit hard by the Depression, and its exotic nightclubs now stood alongside soup kitchens and bread lines. Although Bill still made top dollar entertaining New York's elite, he was painfully aware of the suffering of those around him.
Uncle Bo could not stand to see anybody, I don't care who you were, without, on any level, he just couldn't stand to see it. I think the thing was that he, having had to live the way he did as a youngster, never wanted anybody else to live that way. And for that reason, you could be 90 years old and you were out of luck or you were having a rough time, Uncle Bo had to take care of you.
He would find families dispossessed on the streets of Harlem, pay their back rents, and then give some money to some guys on the street to have furniture moved back in.
At a time when many gave into desperation, Bill Robinson's generosity made him a hero to the people of Harlem, and they named him their honorary mayor.
He had a special badge that he wore from the police department, and they gave him a special type of pistol that was gold with a pearl handle. And so if he saw anyone doing something wrong, he could arrest them because he had that authority.
Bill poured all of his extra time and energy into benefit performances for charities, both as an entertainer and as a producer.
They called him the benefit king. He would always do these charity shows. You just called him and he'd go there, and he did more benefits than anybody else. Abused children or homeless or whatever it might be, he was there to raise money for these people. He was wonderful.
By 1930, Bill Robinson was one of the best-loved celebrities in New York, and on the other side of the country, Hollywood was beginning to take notice. It was the 1930s, and motion pictures had replaced vaudeville as the nation's #1 form of entertainment. Bill Robinson made the step up to movies with a starring role in Harlem is Heaven, an all-black film made for black audiences. But he wanted to work in mainstream Hollywood, even though it had little to offer black actors. In his only studio picture, the 1930 RKO musical Dixiana, he had been relegated to a brief dance number, but he was determined to make it in the big time. And in 1934, when he was offered a role in a major motion picture, he was off to Hollywood. Bill's big chance at a movie career came when Fox Studios chose him as the new dancing partner for their brightest star, a 6-year-old named Shirley Temple.
I like what you like, beans and oyster stew. And I like what you like, on account I love you.
Fast becoming the country's #1 star, Shirley had been busy churning out a succession of cheerful musicals that brought a message of hope to depression-weary audiences. In Shirley's 1935 film, The Little Colonel, Bill was given a supporting role as a butler. He taught the precocious youngster a simplified version of his staircase number, and together, they made Hollywood history.
I want to do that too.
All right. Are you ready?
Yep.
Come on. Say, you catch on quick.
He used to say, Shirley, take small steps, or you know what happens. And she would look at him and just say, yeah, I'd land on my keister. And that was their bonding together.
The dimpled youngster and the elegant old-timer made a magical team. The Little Colonel was a box office smash, and Bill was immediately signed to a 4-picture deal at Fox. His first film on his new contract was In Old Kentucky, with America's favorite grown-up star, Will Rogers.
That boy can certainly do things with shoe leather.
Oh, see, that ain't nothing. That's just the dance he does when he's setting the table for lunch. You ought to see the one he does when he's setting it for dinner.
In Old Kentucky was one of Fox's top moneymakers of 1935. By pairing Bill with its biggest stars, Fox had found a surefire formula for success. But for Bill, this success came at a price.
When Bo was in Vaudeville and on Broadway, he was very proud of his dress symbol, which was top hat and tails. It was an extremely important uniform for Bo because it was a sign of respect. That was one of the first things that Hollywood stripped him of and said, you will play slave roles, you will talk below your abilities. It was a very demeaning situation.
Yes, sir.
Always the roles were as chauffeurs, as janitors, servants of every kind you could think of.
Although frustrated by the limits placed on him in Hollywood, Bill refused to lose sight of his goal of screen stardom.
Bill Robinson was a very smart man, and he always said, you got to learn to stoop to conquer. You know, he said, I'll get there sooner or later, and he did.
By popular demand, Bill reteamed with Shirley Temple in The Littlest Rebel. Although he was once again cast in a stereotypical role, his character was pivotal to the story and proved to be a step in changing Hollywood standards.
Have you got enough?
No, child. It's going to take more money than what we got.
How do people get money?
I know how to get some more money. Come on, honey child.
Yeah, 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 yeah. 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 Yeah, 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 yeah.
It was the first time that a black man had responsibility for a white child. Now, it doesn't sound like a lot in today's society, but in those days, it was a major event. A black and white hand touching in those days, it was taboo. You weren't supposed to do that.
With no children of his own, Bill treated Shirley as if she were his daughter. He proudly displayed 17 pictures of her in his home.
Oh, God, there you're talking about the most beautiful relationship. They really loved each other and really respected each other. And I know how much Uncle Bo loved her. He really adored her.
They used to sneak off and eat ice cream together. That was his favorite food in the world, ice cream, vanilla ice cream. For one of her birthdays, he had given her this electric cart that she used to ride around the Fox lot with.
Bill Robinson, Puffer Supreme, makes his next appearance in Café Metropole.
In 1937, Bill was finally scheduled to play a role that allowed him to trade in his servant garb for an elegant top hat and tails. But in a last-moment decision, the studio inexplicably cut his part from the film, and this rare footage was locked away in the studio vaults, never to be seen. With his dance number pulled from public view, Bill's hopes for a sophisticated screen image were lost, and the studio returned him to playing stereotypical roles. He was disappointed, but like Shirley, he had learned that to get to the top, he had to take small steps. The next year, Bill and Shirley delighted audiences with two more films, Rebecca of Sunnybrook Farm and Just Around the Corner. The chemistry between them still glowed brightly, but Shirley was growing up. Public tastes were changing, and the dancing duo's popularity was fading. It was becoming clear that the partnership would have to come to an end.
I sure hate to see you go, Miss Rebecca.
Oh, I'll be back.
Sure you will, honey. And don't forget this.
I won't.
In 1938, after appearing in 8 Fox films, Bill was dropped from the studio roster. Shirley would soon be let go as well. In only 3 years, Bill had reached an unprecedented level of success for a black performer. Although he had not achieved everything he hoped for, he had won the respect and adoration of his public. Many thought the best part of the 60-year-old dancer's career was over. But Bill would soon show everyone that he wasn't finished with the big time yet. With With nearly a dozen Hollywood films to his name, Bill Robinson returned to his beloved New York City, where he was welcomed with open arms. Delighted to be home, he paraded down the streets in celebration of the World's Fair of 1939. As the toast of the town, Bill starred in Mike Todd's production of The Hot Mikado, the most elaborate all-black musical that had ever been produced. Governor Dewey, J. Edgar Hoover, and several battalions of the New York City Police Department showed up on opening night, where Bill received 8 encores.
I'll never forget my being in the Hot Mikado opening night on Broadway. Every number stopped the show. We never could come out of the stage door without actually trying to find our ways to the bus or the subway, because the whole audience would be right out there by the stage door waiting for us to come out to get our autographs or to try to get in to see him.
Veteran Bill Robinson, Mr. Bojangles himself.
At the age of 61, Bill Bojangles Robinson had become an entertainment icon in the city of New York. The veteran dancer seemed ageless, his energy endless. He performed 3 shows of the Hot Mikado every day and 2 Cotton Club shows every night.
We went to the Cotton Club with Bill Robinson and Cab Calloway. He was a great performer. His taps were so clear, crystal clear, and he never missed a tap. And I could understand why they called him the world's greatest tap dancer.
Bojangles had gained fame beyond his wildest dreams. Although he'd never learned to read or write, he had earned the respect of an entire city. And his blissful existence could best be summed up in an expression he had coined himself.
Bill is credited for saying everything is copacetic. That was his phrase. And everybody said everything is copacetic, meant everything was good.
When the United States entered World War II, the country's top stars focused their energy on the war effort. Bill joined in with unfailing enthusiasm, performing in countless barn rallies.
I remember Danny Kaye being quoted as saying that Bill Robinson once took off his shoes one night in a benefit performance and sold the shoes for $10,000 for the war effort.
As the 64-year-old dancer tirelessly continued with his full schedule of shows and benefits, his wife Fanny grew worried about his health. Noticing his chest pains and shortness of breath, she begged him to slow down. But Bill ignored her concerns and seized every opportunity to work. In 1943, as President Roosevelt began a push for wider employment of black Americans, he urged Hollywood studios to hire more black actors. 20th Century Fox responded with Stormy Weather, a big-budget, all-black musical with a star-studded cast headed by Bill Bojangles Robinson.
Oh, yes, sir.
Joining Bill in this lavish extravaganza were music legends Cab Calloway and Fats Waller. His romantic interest in the film was a 26-year-old singer named Lena Horne. Stormy Weather also featured 2 of Bill's favorite honorary nephews, the Nicholas brothers, in a show-stopping dance number.
I remember when we were getting ready to do our number, and he saw these big stairs that they had built for us to jump over each other's heads into splits. And he said to me, "Are you really going to do that?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Well, good luck."
Stormy Weather was a major milestone for blacks in Hollywood, and it was a personal milestone for Bill. Not only was he playing the leading character in a Hollywood film, he was finally given the opportunity to act and dress like the successful performer that he was.
Baby, tell that lucky day you know darn well, baby, I can't give you anything but love.
He was a movie star. That was the thing that separated him, that made everybody so proud of him. He was a real movie star.
In a world that was still very much segregated, Bill Robinson had transcended racial boundaries in both his career and his personal life. His diverse group of close friends and colleagues included Jackie Robinson, Fred Astaire, Ed Sullivan, Joe Louis, and Milton Berle.
He had many, many friends, all different nationalities, races, and they all loved him. Because of his personality, he had a great personality on stage and off stage.
Bill returned to the stage and born happy, but when he began spending too much time with a shy young chorus girl named Elaine Plains, his wife Fanny asked for a divorce. In June of 1943, the couple ended their 21-year marriage.
Bo was aging at this point, and Bo had a bad heart. Fanny wanted him to stop dancing to live longer. This is something that Bill Robinson would not listen to. And that, more than anything else, was one of the major causes of the divorce. She couldn't live with him and watch him in pain, and he couldn't live without dancing.
On January 27th, 1944, at age 65, Bill married the 24-year-old Elaine. As always, Bill flaunted convention and continued to live the life he wanted to lead, defying his age and his health. In 1945, Bill Robinson was 67 and enjoying his status as a legendary figure in the entertainment world. He was also enjoying domestic life, embracing his new wife's family as his own.
What he got in his old age is security within a family environment. He became the head figure of a family with brothers and sisters and nieces and nephews, and they would play cards with him and they would have fun with him, and he loved that part of it.
But Bill wasn't about to retire. In 1945, he starred in yet another Broadway show, Memphis Bound, an all-black version of Gilbert and Sullivan's HMS Pinafore. He also continued to perform in as many benefits as he could fit into his schedule. By this time, he had danced in over 3,000 shows for charity.
He was generous to a fault. He was a very, very generous person, and I think he enjoyed his celebrity, and he enjoyed what his celebrity enabled him to do to help other people.
At age 68, Bill's health was seriously deteriorating, but he insisted on taking another show on the road, the Bill Robinson Concert Review. His longtime manager, Marty Forkins, gave up all his other clients in order to go on one last tour with his dearest friend, with whom he had shared so many battles and triumphs.
God bless Mr. Forkins. He was right there. He really treated Uncle Bo as though he was a blood relative instead of just a client. He protected him all the way down the line.
Bill's family grew alarmed as his heart began to fail him. But despite doctors' warnings, he refused to slow down. On November 14th, 1949, Bill had a massive heart attack. For days, an anxious public listened to frequent radio bulletins on his condition as he lay in the hospital. On November 25th, Bill Robinson died at the age of 71. As his fans across the country mourned the loss of a national treasure, the people of New York joined in a tearful farewell to the man who had brought them so much joy.
There has never been, and I doubt there will ever be, another funeral like that. You saw people lining both sides of the street and the park and the thruway. He didn't have a mother, he didn't have a father, but nobody in this world has ever been grieved for as he has. Kings and queens haven't gotten that. And you never saw so many grown men with the tears coming down and reaching back to get their handkerchiefs.
It was the largest funeral in New York's city history. Over 1.5 million people lined the streets from Harlem to Brooklyn. His body lay in state at the Armory up in Harlem because it was large enough to hold the crowds. It was an outpouring of love.
He was so generous to New York City and so revered. He was a dignitary in his death. They lined up. It was huge, and it wasn't just New Yorkers. I mean, people came from all over the world to mourn his passing.
Having spent, gambled, or given away his fortune, Bill died virtually penniless. Friends and colleagues raised the needed funds for his elaborate funeral. Ed Sullivan coordinated the ceremony, and honorary pallbearers included Duke Ellington, Joe Louis, Bob Hope, Jackie Robinson, Joe DiMaggio, and Irving Berlin. In his eulogy, the Reverend Adam Clayton Powell Jr. said, "Bill wasn't a credit to his race, meaning the Negro race. Bill was a credit to the human race. He was not a great Negro dancer. He was the world's greatest dancer."
Bill was so revered by everyone. Bill had both white and black people who were in awe of him. Everybody loved Bill Robinson.
All of us who have come behind Bill Robinson owe him a debt of appreciation. Because as I sat in the movie theater watching him dance, I could also see the Little Rock riots and how they didn't want people like me to come to a school. To see him, it made me feel like it was possible that I could do that.
I don't think there'll be another person like him. And I miss him very much because he was my favorite. He was in a class all by himself. There was only one Bill Robinson.
I'd like to see you looking swell, baby. Diamond bracelets Woolworth doesn't sell, baby. Tell that lucky day you know darn well, baby. I can't give you anything but love.